He arrived late, not slightly. Hours. The other man had been waiting since dawn. Everything prepared, everything in place, clothing untouched, blade polished, form rehearsed to precision. There was no uncertainty in him, only control. Sasaki Kojiro had done everything correctly. Years of repetition, clean technique, refined movement, nothing wasted, nothing left to chance. Miyamoto Musashi arrived without that structure. Unwashed, unfocused from the outside, holding a wooden weapon shaped along the way, no visible preparation, no visible system. The exchange was brief, too brief to study, too brief to correct. One acted, one hesitated, it ended there. Most people misunderstand what happened. They focus on skill, on technique, on the visible difference between the two. That is not where the outcome was decided. One had built perfection. The other had built response. Perfection requires conditions. Response does not. When the moment breaks expectation, perfection pauses. Response continues. This is not about combat. It is about structure. Most people build their lives the way Kojiro trained. They prepare, refine, organize, optimize. Everything is arranged before anything begins. It looks disciplined. It feels responsible. It creates the impression of progress, but nothing moves because movement has been replaced by preparation. There is always one more adjustment, one more improvement, one more detail to fix. The beginning keeps shifting forward. This is rarely seen as avoidance. It is labeled as diligence, but the result is the same. No action. There is a point where preparation stops serving action and begins replacing it. Most people do not notice when they cross it. They believe they are getting closer. They are not. They are staying where they are. The problem is not lack of effort. It is misdirected effort. Effort applied to planning creates clarity in thought, but not in reality. Reality responds only to action. This is where the difference begins. In a mountain village, years before that duel, the same pattern appeared. Different place, same structure. A woman arrived with intention, clear goals, defined direction. She wanted to train, to become capable, to move forward with purpose. Everything about her approach looked correct. She wrote detailed routines, organized her days, planned her progression. Each step was defined, each phase mapped, each variable considered. Nothing was missing. Except action. Days passed, then weeks, then months. Every week began the same way. A decision to start, followed by adjustment. The plan needed refinement. The timing needed correction. The conditions were not yet right. There was always a reason, always logical, always reasonable, and always delaying. Others in the village trained daily, without structure, without detailed systems. Their movement was inconsistent, imperfect, unrefined, but it existed. They improved slowly, without noticing. She remained still, with perfect plans. This creates a specific kind of tension. Outward readiness, inward resistance. The mind feels active, but nothing changes. Eventually, the pattern becomes visible, not through analysis, through contrast. 6 months passed. Nothing had begun. At that point, clarity becomes unavoidable. You are not preparing. You are avoiding. Avoidance rarely looks like avoidance. It looks like control. Control over variables, control over timing, control over outcome. But control before action is imagined. It has no contact with reality. And because of that, it cannot hold under pressure. When something is finally attempted, the structure collapses, not because it was weak, because it was never tested. This is where most people experience friction. They expect their preparation to support them. It does not. They hesitate, pause, try to recall what they planned, and in that pause, they lose the moment. This is the same point where Kojiro lost, not because he lacked skill, because he required alignment. When alignment broke, so did his response. Musashi did not depend on alignment. He had removed that requirement. His structure was built through action, repeated, adjusted, refined through contact with reality. That kind of structure does not need preparation to function. It has already been tested. This is the difference. Preparation builds expectation. Action builds adaptability. Expectation is fragile. Adaptability is stable. The woman in the village was building expectation. She believed that once everything was correct, action would be easy. It never became correct, because correctness is not achieved before action. It is developed through it. This is where most people remain stuck. They want clarity before movement, but clarity comes from movement. They want confidence before action, but confidence follows repetition. They want readiness before beginning, but readiness is created by beginning. Reversing this order is what creates the loop. The more you wait to feel ready, the further you move from starting. Because readiness never arrives on its own. It requires contact, mistake, adjustment. Without those, nothing develops. The mind continues to refine what has never been used. That refinement becomes infinite, and the starting point disappears. This is not a lack of discipline. It is discipline misapplied. Effort without direction, control without movement. The solution is not more structure. It is interruption, breaking the sequence, moving before the system feels complete. This feels incorrect, unstable, uncontrolled. But it is the only way forward, because movement creates feedback. Feedback creates correction. Correction creates improvement. Without movement, none of this exists, only thought. And thought does not build skill. It builds intention. Intention without action becomes frustration. This is where the shift begins, not in understanding, in decision, a small action, without preparation, without refinement, without waiting. It will be inefficient, imprecise, unstable. That is expected, but it will be real, and once something is real, it can be adjusted. This is where progress actually begins, not at the point of perfection, at the point of contact. Most people never reach that point, not because they cannot, because they delay it. They remain in preparation, and preparation, when extended too far, becomes a barrier, not support. This is the lesson hidden in that duel, not about skill, not about talent, about structure. One built on preparation, one built on action. Only one could continue when the moment broke. He saw it immediately. Not in her words, in her behavior, the hesitation, the need to explain, the attachment to preparation. She believed she was being careful. He knew she was avoiding. "You are not preparing," he said. "You are protecting yourself from starting." That is difficult to accept because preparation feels responsible. It feels like discipline. It gives a sense of control, but control without action is imagined. He did not argue with her plans. He ignored them. Instead, he pointed to something simpler. "Stand." She stood. "Strike." She hesitated, not because she could not move, because she did not know how. That was the point. "I don't know the correct form," she said. "Then you will learn it," he replied, "by doing it wrong." She moved, unbalanced, uncertain, incomplete. He stepped aside. Again. No explanation, no correction beyond what was necessary. Each attempt was adjusted slightly, not everything at once. Only what was visible. Position, then movement, then focus, nothing theoretical, only immediate feedback. After a short time, something changed. Not in her knowledge, in her body. The movement was still imperfect, but it was more stable. This is how learning actually occurs, not through understanding first, through repetition. Understanding follows. Most people reverse this. They try to understand before they act. This creates delay, and delay prevents contact. Without contact, nothing develops. He kept the process narrow. One action, repeated, adjusted. No expansion, no variation, no complexity. Because complexity hides error. Simplicity reveals it. This is uncomfortable because error becomes visible. Most people avoid this stage. They prefer to prepare longer, refine further, delay exposure, but without exposure, nothing stabilizes. She felt the resistance, the urge to step back, to think more, to organize. That urge is familiar. It appears as logic, as improvement, as responsibility. It is none of those. It is avoidance of discomfort. He removed her ability to return to it. When she began writing again, he burned the pages, not to be extreme, to be clear. "You are returning to what keeps you still," he said. "There is a point where thinking stops helping. Beyond that point, it prevents movement." He placed a constraint. No planning beyond the day, no review beyond immediate correction. This forced attention into the present, without projection, without adjustment of future conditions. Only what is in front of you. This simplifies the process, and simplicity reduces resistance. Over time, something shifted. The need to plan decreased, not because she forced it, because it became unnecessary. She was already moving. Movement removes the need for preparation, because preparation exists to simulate movement. When movement is real, simulation becomes irrelevant. This is the break, from imagined control to actual engagement. Once this happens, progress accelerates, not dramatically, steadily. Because correction is continuous. Each attempt produces information. Each adjustment refines it. There is no delay between error and correction. This compresses learning. Others trained differently. They waited, refined form, studied structure. Only after everything was correct did they begin. But when they began, they lacked experience. Their movement looked clean. But it had not been tested. Under pressure, it failed, because it had never been unstable. Stability built without instability is fragile. She had been unstable from the beginning. This created adaptability, not by intention, by exposure. She did not know what would happen, so she responded. Response is built in uncertainty. Certainty removes the need to respond. This is why perfect environments limit development. They remove variability, and without variability, adjustment does not occur. He explained this simply. "You are improving because you are acting," he said, "not because you understand." Understanding came later, when patterns repeated, when adjustments held, when movement became consistent. Then it made sense. But only after it existed. Most people wait for it to make sense first. It never does, because it has not been experienced. This is the trap. Clarity is expected before action. In reality, clarity is produced by action. This is not philosophical, it is practical. You move, you fail, you adjust. That sequence repeats. Over time, it builds something stable. Not because it was planned, because it was tested. He showed her something else. "Children learn this way," he said. "They do not prepare, they attempt. They fall, adjust, try again. No resistance, no delay. This is why their progress is fast, not because they are capable, because they are unconcerned with being wrong. Being wrong is part of the process. Adults avoid it, so they delay. Delay reduces repetition. Repetition builds skill. Without repetition, nothing develops." She began to see it clearly. Her months of preparation had produced nothing. Her days of action had already changed her. Not completely, but noticeably. This is enough, because progress does not require completion. It requires direction, and direction is established through movement, not planning. He added one more point. "Fear does not disappear before action," he said. "It disappears through action." Waiting for fear to leave keeps you in place. Moving while it is present reduces its influence. This is not immediate, but it is reliable. Over time, what felt difficult becomes neutral. Not easy, manageable. This is where consistency forms, not through motivation, through reduced resistance. And resistance is reduced by repetition, not by thinking. She stopped trying to feel ready and began to act. That was the shift, not dramatic, not visible to others, but decisive. Because once action becomes primary, everything else adjusts around it. By the third month, nothing looked organized. There was no written routine, no fixed sequence, no visible system, but the work was consistent. Every morning began the same way. Wake, stand, move. No preparation, no delay. The gap between intention and action had been removed. This is where discipline changes. At the beginning, action feels forced. You push through resistance. You negotiate with yourself. Later, that negotiation disappears. Not because the task becomes easier, because the decision has already been made. There is nothing left to discuss. This is what most people try to achieve through motivation. It does not come from motivation. It comes from repetition. Once a pattern is repeated enough, it becomes automatic, not perfect, but reliable. That is enough. Her movements were still imperfect, but they were immediate. She did not pause to think. She did not check herself before acting. She moved, then adjusted. This is where adaptability forms, not in controlled environments, in active ones, where mistakes are allowed, where correction is continuous. This builds something different from technique. It builds response. Technique can be memorized. Response cannot. It is developed through contact. One evening, he introduced a different idea. Momentum, he said, not as energy, as accumulation. Small actions repeated create movement. That movement gains weight. Over time, it becomes difficult to stop. This is how consistency actually forms. Not through effort alone, through continuity. If the gap between actions is small, the process continues. If the gap is large, it resets. Most people live in reset. They act briefly, then stop. When they return, they start again from the beginning. This prevents accumulation. Without accumulation, nothing compounds. Her practice had changed that. The gap was gone. This allowed momentum to build slowly without force. This is what people misunderstand about discipline. They try to create intensity. Intensity fades. Continuity remains. He removed every condition. No after this. No when ready. No once everything is set. Just begin. This simplifies everything. Because conditions create delay. Remove the condition. Remove the delay. The process becomes immediate. This is where clarity appeared, not as thought, as absence of noise. When she sat in stillness, her mind did not produce plans. It remained quiet. This was new, because before the mind was always active, planning, adjusting, reworking. Now there was nothing to adjust. The action had already happened. This reduces internal conflict. When action is complete, the mind has less to process. This creates space, and in that space, things become clearer, not through effort, through absence. This is where understanding stabilizes. Not through explanation, through repetition without resistance. At this point, something important became visible. Structure had formed, not written, not designed, observed. Through daily action, patterns emerged. What worked stayed, what did not disappeared. This is natural refinement, not forced. Most people try to build structure before action. This creates rigidity because it is based on assumption. Real structure is based on feedback, and feedback requires action. Without it, everything remains theoretical. She now had a routine, but it was not planned. It had formed. This is more stable because it has been tested, not imagined. Spring came. With it, something real. 3 men entered the village, demanding, aggressive, uncertain. Others hesitated. They discussed, planned, considered options. Time passed. The situation escalated. She did not wait, not because she was certain, because she was accustomed to acting. She stepped forward. No announcement, no preparation, just movement. The exchange was uneven, not clean, not controlled, but continuous. She did not stop to think. Each movement followed the previous one. Adjustment happened within motion, not before it. This is the difference. When you pause to think, you lose continuity. When you continue, you maintain pressure. The outcome followed, not because of perfect execution, because of uninterrupted action. The others watched. They had more training, more structure, more refinement. But they had not practiced this, acting without preparation. Their skill required conditions. When those conditions were absent, they paused. That pause was enough. After nothing was said, it did not need to be. The difference was visible. Later news arrived. The duel, the same pattern, one prepared, one acted. The result was consistent. This is not coincidence. It is structure. Preparation creates dependency. Action creates adaptability. Only one holds under change. This is the part most people resist because action exposes weakness, planning hides it. But hidden weakness remains. Exposed weakness can be corrected. This is the path. Not comfortable, not clean, but effective. Years later, she saw the same pattern again. A student arrived, prepared, organized. With plans, she did not read them. She handed him a tool. Begin. He hesitated. I don't know how. Then learn, she said, through action. Within minutes, he understood something. Not fully, but enough. More than months of preparation had given him. This is how it continues. Not through instruction, through demonstration. Begin, adjust, continue. There is nothing more complex than this, and nothing more avoided, because it requires letting go of control, not externally. Internally, you stop waiting for certainty. You move without it. Over time, certainty becomes unnecessary. This is where stability forms, not in knowing everything, in continuing without needing to. The lesson is simple, not easy. Do not wait to begin. Do not prepare beyond necessity. Do not delay action for clarity. Move. Let the movement teach you. Everything else will follow. That is all.